Nicholas Britell, you've scored yet another Adam McKay film, Don't Look Up. And I understand you were writing music for this before filming even began, which is the opposite of how music is usually incorporated into films. So how early did Adam bring you on to this project?
Well, it's been amazing getting to work with Adam over the years now. We've really forged this creative partnership. And I don't think I've written music, before he shot something before. So this was the first time he sort of asked for that. I had read the script and I knew when they were getting ready to shoot. And also I was beginning to work on the song Just Look Up that was going to be in the film. And it was around that time that Adam said, for some of the actors, I'd love to play an early idea of the score just to give people a sense of kind of the feeling that the movie could have. And from the script and the conversations I'd had, I created a piece that I called the Overture to Logic and Knowledge, which was attempting to sort of grasp that sound of like a reverence for rationality and science and knowledge and higher aspirations of humankind, and sort of as a starting point for obviously trying to figure out the opposite of that sound.
Before it all goes downhill.
Before the roller coaster goes off the rails. But so I wrote this piece, and I Adam played it for the actors. Actually, I think he played it for them during the telescope, some of those early telescope sequences, and that was the beginning. Those were some of the first ideas that I came up with for that, and actually that piece is in the film, and obviously served as a real that early concept that I created was something that the motif of it is woven through the whole film. But that piece itself, you hear at the dinner table sequence, right?
Which is perfect because it's so bittersweet and poignant, like perfect for that moment as well.
The sort of feeling, exactly that feeling of like that. I think the beautiful thing of film music and film in general, is you have the wonderful juxtapositions where that piece on its own has a certain feeling, and then when you combine it with that moment in the film, that story, those characters, it takes on that hue of loss, actually, I think.
Yeah, and then all like the dialogue in there too, with like Jennifer Lawrence saying like I'm grateful that we tried, and
Exactly.
Leo saying we really did have it all, which is just like it gets you. So
Yeah.
but I want to talk about the main theme, which I love because it's this like upbeat big band jazz.
Yeah.
And the first time I heard it, like it's a motif that's like repeated throughout the film, but the first time I heard it reminded me of the Succession theme. And then I later
Really? That's interesting.
realized that like there's this like kind of like dissonance to it that's like also
Uh-huh.
in the Succession theme. Like it's like there's like this like anxiety, like this like race against time. And obviously like the film, you have to balance all these different tones. Like it's like comedy, farce, and like drama and
Totally.
satire. So what
Totally.
was your approach to that, and when and how did you come up with big band jazz?
Yeah, yeah. What's interesting, every project I do with Adam, I think, is its own kind of tonal experiment in a way. I think from The Big Short, where I remember people calling that movie a docu-dramedy, sort of combination of genres maybe, and Succession, like you mentioned, is that absurdity and gravitas. This movie has its own kind of tonal equation, I would say, and it was really a challenge to figure out. Actually, I worked on it all in with Adam. I mean, must have been over a year that I worked on this, and I figured out that main title idea. I've had this sort of real joy of getting to work in person with Hank and Adam in the edit over these projects over the years, and during we made this through the whole the earlier parts of the pandemic and into this whole past year, and I got to go to LA and I worked with them. And a lot of the time we're experimenting in the room there with things. So I'll have an idea and I'll say, hey, this may be crazy, but let me show you something, and that sort of immediate feedback is really wonderful because you feel free to make mistakes and try things out and not worry about it. But I remember I was having this conversation with Adam where I said, if we, the feeling of, for example, with climate change, the feeling that like we're not going to do anything about it in time and we're going to lose this race, this battle. I said, it's almost like we're going to lose, it's like we're in World War II, but we're going to lose World War II. And then I was like, well, what if we did like a what if we did like a big band? Like, what is this like mid-century big band, but it was like crazy and it had like a toy piano and, you know, all sorts of weird instruments in it. And you know, Adam and Hank are amazing. They're just like, well, try it out, you know, just let's see what happens. You know, so I wrote this piece and I put it up against the main title sequence actually. And I remember Adam and Hank saying how they felt so inspired kind of by that. And it almost, I think in some ways it almost helped us figure out some other tonal questions in the film too, you know, just like this sort of feeling of not just anxiety, but I think it's also a feeling of ever increasing astonishment at how crazy things are. That's kind of what it's sort of like, you know, it's already a big band with these like dueling trumpets, and but then there's like a bass sax that's really loud in the mix, and there's celestas and pianos and banjo and mandolin and the toy piano, and it's just kind of got the whole kitchen sink. And I think that's this sort of raucous, brash feeling was something that you know, that actually was helpful in other elements of the film. And then once we sort of experimented with that, then it was a question of, well, how do you tie all these things together? And that was a big process. This was definitely the most challenging score I think I've done before.
Mm-hmm. I want to go back to the toy piano. Is that the primary instrument in one of the final tracks, Memento Mori? It's
So
like twinkling
that's
lullaby
actually a
sound.
celesta.
Okay.
With the toy piano. The toy piano I use more for the it's got that kind of like, it's very aggressive, less resonant sound. It's a little more of a clanky kind of a sound, I guess I would say. The celesta I find is such a beautiful sound. You know, it's that bell tone essentially. And I use that both in the first piece, in the discovery piece that you hear, and I use it in the Memento Mori is with both celestas and harps. So
Mm-hmm. I love it because it's like so bittersweet, and it's like sort of like lulling them to sleep a little bit. The comet scene, when everyone finally looks up and sees the comet, that's also a great piece, and it really captures the feeling of just awe at like the cosmos. So how did you score that one?
thank you. That was exactly the hope I had, was that it would feel that sort of like awe at the universe, awe at wonder, you know, at that. And I think, and a sense of something larger than us, you know, this feeling of something so beyond the scope of our understanding, perhaps, in a way, which is such, you know, and obviously the film itself and the comet is a metaphor for that concept, that process, that feeling. So that was an interesting moment. It was actually something where I took the motif that I had written for that overture to logic and knowledge, which you know, which we used as that sort of starting concept, and then I took it and I was like, oh, what if I did more of an orchestral rendition of this? And there was something about there's actually a lot of low strings there that I really brought out in the mix at that moment. It's actually, you start with the high sort of more twinkling, it's pianos, celestas, and harps all sort of doubled, you know, with the motif, that sort of bum, 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 that motif. And then at the moment of the revelation, when it's really there right above them, you feel all the low strings coming in. That, for me, it's that sense of grounding and sort of the foundational underpinning feeling, which to me, it's the combination of those things that felt like you're looking up at something that you know you will never fully understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's space. Who isn't like awestruck by space?
Exactly, awe-filled, you know. And actually the second half of the piece is my favorite part, because what happens is this sort of this piano comes in. There's a lot of juxtaposition of elements where you have these sort of feelings of maybe profundity or grandeur, and then you have these more intimate instruments and dissonances, and I think it's the combination of those. So this piano comes in the second half, and then there's a flute that's just sort of walking around, hitting all the wrong notes on the way up, you know, as we sort of go away. And that's kind of this feeling of it. We have awe-filled wonder, but then we also have the realization that we are not doing anything.
Yeah, like what's coming next.
That's always the other part of it. It's wonder, and then yet the train is going off the rails.
Yeah, but that's like, it's just a great like segue into like the, you know, like you mentioned like the other pieces, like the overture and then like Memento Mori at the end. So yeah. Well, Nicholas, it was great speaking to you as always. Thanks again for your time, and you get to stay on because everyone's coming back.
Okay.